Hello, welcome to today's project, and today we're going to have some fun. So today's project is, the cameraman is laughing. Today's project we're going to do without using brushes. So this is the finished object, and I'm going to tell you the bits and pieces I've used to make them, but you can add anything you like into this. So anything that will allow you to make a texture. So what have I used? I've got some sponges here. I've got some bits of fabric. I've got some credit cards that have been cut up. I've got a dropper that was actually part of a set that made salad sauce. I'm not going to use it again for salad sauce. I've got some craft knives, a scalpel and a craft knife for scraping out the paint. And now I know this is a brush, but it's a toothbrush, so we are going to use this, but we're not going to count that as a brush. And I've got these, which originally were sticks to put on your barbecue. You put meat or vegetables on and you put them on the barbecue, and they've got one pointed end. So that's all the stuff I'm going to use. Move it to one side for now. I've got the colours that I'm going to use, and today's colours are some yellow ochre, a sort of dirtyish yellow. I've got burnt sienna. I obviously need to buy some more burnt sienna. Okay. I've got some ultramarine. Ultramarine is quite an interesting colour because it's quite a slightly reddy blue, but it's also non-staining, so it will come out quite easily. And I've got some, this is actually Payne's Grey, but you can use neutral tint if that's the one you've got. So let's look first at the composition, because although we're having a play, we've still got to have some sort of composition. And let's move that out of the way. I'm going to show it to you on this piece of paper because I'm going to draw harder. So I'm going to actually mark the paper more than you would when you use it on your watercolour paper. So generally when you're sketching on your watercolour paper, make sure it's fairly light. You should be able to see it, but it should be fairly light, because once you've painted over it, it will be quite difficult to get rid of your pencil lines. So here's the size I've chosen to do. See, I've drawn my frame out. Again, I'll repeat, it's very important when you draw your frame is to paint over the edges of your frame. If you paint over the edges of your frame, you've got different choices. So if you can see, I've got a frame here, but I could say, okay, well, maybe it'll look better if I go that way a bit, or maybe it'll look better if I go that way a bit, or up here a bit, or down here a bit. So you've got ½ centimetre all the way around, so you've got a different choice, a slightly different cropping of your composition when you've finished. Now this composition is going to be really easy. So all we need to do is we start about a quarter of the way, and we draw right. That's your composition, and we're going to put some, perhaps a little bit down here. Okay, that's it. So you can see here, it's important not to get this in the middle. So this is actually on one side. You could actually make it go if you wish, and then it's a bit further that way. So now we'll draw it out on here. Right, all set to go. Good, so I'm going to mix up some colours, and I'm going to cheat a bit and use a brush to mix up the colours, because it's a bit difficult to mix them up. up without a brush, but we're not going to use a brush on the painting. So you can see I've just put water in here, and then I'm going to add some blue, and then we'll test it. Yeah, that's not too bad. We do need to mix up quite a lot. There is nothing worse than getting halfway through painting something and you've run out of colour, because then what happens is while you're mixing up the next lot of colour, your painting is drying. And could you see if you could find me an eraser, please? I just want to rub out a few more. Just a little bit too strong. You just need to be able to just see it, but it's not too. So we're going to take our piece of fabric and we're just going to wash across the top so that it's wet but not soaking wet until you get to about 3 or 4 centimetres from the bottom. And then you take your cloth again and don't forget, it should get lighter as it comes down. Perfect. So I'm going to let that dry before I go on to the next section. Okay, so you can see the paper is now dry, and that's quite important. Your paper should be dry. Now, paper is dry when it's got no more little ripples in it. So if you've got a slight bulge in it somewhere, it means it's not quite dry. And is there a problem with that? Well, no, but you will get unpredictable results if your paper isn't dry. Another thing I want to draw your attention to is, look, I've used all the blue paint that I mixed up. So again, please mix up enough paint. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the same thing again. And I'm going to mix up some raw sienna and burnt sienna here. Test it out. Yeah, that's good. And this time we're going to take another piece of fabric. And balance it out, so you've got some colour here. Make sure at the same time you're putting some colour on the other side of the picture. So again, that's with a piece of fabric. And we're building up the tones. So in the, if we have a look again at the finished painting, you can see that there are, there's the white here, tone 1. There's the blue here, tone 2. There's some yellow here, tone 3. And it's very important, when I see a lot of watercolours, the reason that they don't work is because they haven't got tone 5. You've got to have your darkest darks in there. So make sure you've got some paint in there that's got almost no water in. Okay, so we don't need to dry that off. And I need to mix up some more paint. You do get through quite a lot of paint in this exercise. Add in with the sponge. A little bit more over here. Always make sure you can get the tops off your paints before you start making the video. Could we pause the video, please? Good, so I want to add my darks into here, and I'm using neutral tint, but you can use Payne's Grey. Payne's Grey is a little bit bluer, but that's fine. So let's mix up some. Blue. A little bit too dark, that one. Actually, I can use that. There. So, neutral tint and some blue. Notice how when I'm working, I'm turning, and it's still wet, so it's running in. Okay, that's not too bad. What I want is some darker. Let it dry a little bit as well. I want to put some darker colour in this area here, but it's still wet at the moment, and I want it to look like a separate shape, so I'm going to let that one dry off a little bit. But before I do that, I want to put some really dark in this area here. Bubble wrap. Screw it up. Oh yeah, great. Blue. Okay, good. Right, so I'm going to dry that off now, and then I'm going to add a few more darks to it. Okay, so the painting is now dry. Well, I'm not unhappy with that at the moment, but now is the moment you look at it and you think, okay, what else does this need now? I'm going to put some light tree trunks in here, so I'm going to have to darken up some of this area here, and this tree here, it's a little bit light for the balance, and perhaps a little bit of dark in this area here. So I'm going to first of all add some blue. It's quite difficult this, because you're mixing up the blue with your brush, and the temptation is to take your brush onto the painting, and we're not going to do that. Blue here. And let's add some. So notice sometimes I'm dabbing and sometimes I'm sweeping. So you want different textures. Will give you the good, and a little bit more here. Oops, that's too much. So what we can do now is we take your dark colour and we put some of this and this is the effect we're looking for. So we'll take this. Is this dry? To be on the safe side, I think I'll just dry it one more time. So now with my dropper, I'm going to put in some branches and tree trunks. Oops, a bit too thick. Press too hard. I want quite a fine line there. Stroke it on your paper. Oops, a bit too thick. If you find it's coming out too thick, this is when we take our stick. On this part, different colour, using the brown here. Don't forget, don't draw your tree trunk going all the way up. There will be branches and leaves that will cover over part of it. So resist tempt to doing just one line going all the way. With this one. See, it's coming out a bit thicker than. Okay. Right, so the last thing I want to tell you is we want to put in some, we've got a very dark area here, and I'm going to put in some light trunks. So, very important, make sure the paper in the area you're scraping out is dry. And then all you do notice I'm not just doing one straight line. That's some nice little birches there. Make that one in a little bit thicker. Obviously don't scrape through to the back of your paper. Okay, now I've got a little bit too much going on here, because you don't want too much interest on the sides of your painting. You should have the interest in the middle of your painting. So I'm just going to take some fabric again. I'm just going to soften that up a bit so it's not quite so dramatic. So we've got lighter areas here, darker areas in the foreground. Don't forget, aerial perspective always means that you should have your darkest darks in the foreground of your painting. You could actually just texture in this bit here. And what haven't I used scraping it out, bit of texture with my crayon card, and okay, I think we're nearly done. Not totally happy with those bits here, but we've got to the stage where it's put it on one side and see what else it needs. Oh, I'll tell you what it needs. It needs a few birds. Good, so this is as far as we've got, and at this stage we take our frame, and it is worth cutting one of these little bits of cardboard or paper just to put round so you can see your finished composition. And at this stage you put it on one side for a couple of days and look at it. Does it need more? Do you want to scribble take some of the colour out, and think about it. So as I said, have fun with this project. There's nothing you can do wrong. Go wild with it. Don't overthink it. And if any of you'd like to, and some of you have, sent me your paintings, please do. We can chat about it online. And that's all for today. Happy painting.